The lowest mortgage rate can become the most expensive decision you ever make. And I know that sounds backwards because when you're choosing a mortgage lender, the first instinct is pretty obvious. Who is the lowest rate? Who has the lowest payment? Who can get me approved the fastest? And look, those questions matter, but they are not the whole picture, not even close. Because the lender you choose before you find the house may determine what happens after you fall in love with the house. And honestly, that is where it gets real. Welcome to episode 251 of the Martini Mortgage Podcast. I am Kevin Martini, a certified mortgage advisor and producing branch manager, NMLS 143962, with the Martini Mortgage Group at Gold Star Mortgage Financial Group Corporation, NMLS 3446, Equal Housing Lender. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not legal or tax advice. Now, with that out of the way, let's just talk like if we were sitting across a table from each other. Because I don't think most buyers get this wrong because they are careless. I think they get it wrong because nobody ever told them what they were actually choosing. Most buyers believe they're choosing a rate. They are not. They're choosing a process. They're choosing a person in a system that will be responsible for their file when the appraisal comes in lower than expected, when the underwriter flags a deposit nobody mentioned up front, when a job change surfaces at the worst possible moment, when the deadline is 4 days away and something still needs to be clear. Rate, fees, big name brands, fast approvals, and again, all of that can matter. But here's what nobody's telling you. A mortgage lender is not just someone who gives you a loan. The real job is protecting the outcome once emotions, money, deadlines, and pressure all collide. And once you start seeing it that way, the entire conversation changes. Here's something I want you to hold on to. Later in this episode, I'm going to give you 3 questions almost nobody asks a mortgage lender, but they reveal nearly everything. Most buyers are not actually choosing a lender. They're choosing a promise that the approval is real, a promise that the numbers are accurate, a promise that communication will happen when it matters, a promise that if pressure shows up, someone competent is actually steering the file. And I see this all the time. Buyers assume all approvals are basically the same, and they are not. A pre-qualification is not the same as a fully reviewed approval. A fast answer is not always a reliable answer. A friendly lender is not automatically a prepared lender. And a low quote is not always the lowest cost of borrowing. If the process creates delays, confusion, or risk, that's why this matters so much. Not because it's exciting. Nobody wakes up saying, oh, you know what sounds fun today? Vetting my mortgage lender's underwriting process. But here's what clarity does. When buyers feel uncertain, they hesitate. When they hesitate, they overanalyze. When they overanalyze, they either freeze or they make a reactive decision. And honestly, I think that's where a lot of unnecessary stress comes from. Not the home itself, not even the payment sometimes, the uncertainty. Now, here's something specific to buyers in North Carolina that changes the stakes completely. When you go under contract here in North Carolina, you pay what is called a due diligence fee directly to the seller. It is not held in escrow. It does not come back if the deal falls apart. It goes directly to the seller the moment both parties sign. In Raleigh right now, that fee can be anywhere from a couple of $100, not likely, but it could be, to tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the home and how competitive the situation is. So here's what that means for a lender selection. If your lender misses a condition deadline, that money is gone. If their underwriting process is slower than the contract requires, that money is gone. It doesn't matter what rate they quoted. It doesn't matter how friendly they were on the phone. That is not a rate problem. That is a process problem. And the only way to know whether your lender has the process to protect you is to ask before you go under contract, not afterwards. So now you really have two paths. Path one is being reactive. You shop for rates, you get a quick pre-approval letter, you start touring homes, you hope everything works out once you get under contract. And maybe it does. But maybe issues show up later that should have been addressed earlier. Now, the second path, the better path, is the strategic one. You understand your numbers before shopping for a home. You know what your approval is actually based on. You know where possible friction exists. You know how your lender communicates with your real estate agent. You know what happens if something unexpected appears. Again, the second path feels calmer because it is calmer, not because there's zero risk. Because risk was identified before it became urgent. And this is where people get it wrong. They think clarity slows them down. It does not. Clarity speeds up a great decision. Guessing slows everything down. Now, here's those three questions I told you to hold on to. Almost nobody asked for them, but they reveal nearly everything about whether a lender can actually protect you. The first question: walk me through your approval process before I make an offer. Not afterwards, but before. Because this tells you that the quality of the preparation. Was the income actually reviewed? Were the assets actually documented? Were possible issues identified early? Or was the approval mostly based on a conversation and a self-reported number? There's a difference between looking approved and being prepared. A very big one. The second question is, how do you communicate with my real estate agent? This matters more than you realize. A strong lender doesn't disappear after issuing a letter. They create confidence around the offer. They communicate clearly. They keep everyone informed. They reduce uncertainty inside the transaction, and in competitive situations in the triangle, that matters more than you think. The third question: what happens if problems show up after we're under contract? Almost nobody asked this. But this question reveals nearly everything because vague answers mean weak systems. We'll figure it out. That usually doesn't happen. Don't worry about is what they say. Those are not strategies. A lender with a real process can tell you exactly who owns the issue, how communication works, how conditions get cleared, how timelines are protected. That's what you deserve to know before money, inspections, appraisal, and emotional energy are already on the line. And look, I'm not saying this to create any fear. I'm saying this because fear usually becomes from uncertainty. Clarity reduces fear. That's why we believe very strongly here at the Martini Mortgage Group that it should be home loan first strategy. The mortgage work happens before the house hunt, not because paperwork is so exciting, but because confidence is built before pressure arrives. That's also why we use our proprietary same as cash mortgage approval. Now, this is not a gimmick, not a fancy label, a stronger review up front, a cleaner file up front, a more reliable approval up front. Because when the right home appears, the goal is not to scramble. The goal is to be already ready. When buyers know their verified numbers up front, everything changes. You stop asking, can I do this? And start asking, does this home fit the strategy? That's a completely different emotional position. And honestly, it's a much healthier one. So let me ask you something. What would change if you had clarity around your numbers before you started shopping? Would this feel lighter if you understood your real options? And if the right home appears tomorrow, would you feel prepared? Not pressured, prepared. Because choosing a mortgage lender is not about finding someone who can quote a number. It's about finding someone whose process can hold up under pressure. Someone who tells you the truth before it's convenient. Someone who understands that the mortgage should support your life, not just complete a transaction. And honestly, I think buyers deserve that level of guidance. Because buying a home should feel clear, not chaotic. And here's the Martiniism for episode 251 of the Martini Mortgage Podcast. The right rate gets you to the table. The right lender gets you to the closing table. If you want that kind of clarity for your situation, reach out to me directly. My name is Kevin Martini, and my number is 919-238-4934. And if this episode gave you clarity, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.